Hey there, if you enjoy my work, please take a moment to like the video. I need your help if I'm going to resurrect this channel. We may never know what parts of ourselves we leave behind, what energies remain imprinted on the fabric of reality once our lives have ended. Some say that children possess very special connections to the unknown, that they can see and experience things that most adults have long forgotten. These questions weigh heavily in my mind after revisiting this tragic story. Listen, and let me know what you think. I do have to warn you though, this story does contain some graphic depictions of what may be considered violence of the domestic variety. If anyone is particularly sensitive to hearing things like that, I would understand if you'd rather skip this story. And if you do decide to skip it, let me know down in the comments. I'm curious. So here we go. Dear Mr. X, my name is Tammy. We've spoken before, I'm sure you recall. Not long ago, I sent you a story about a haunting. It was great to be able to share my experiences with your audience, people who wouldn't try to make me feel like an idiot or a liar. You may not be surprised to know that I have another story that I think you'll find interesting. These events happened several years after I was haunted by May, the woman in the yellow dress. This happened when I was around 9 years old, still living in Nevada. I might have mentioned this before, but back then, I ended up home alone pretty often because both of my parents worked full-time. My dad was in the Army and was able to get my mom a position at a munitions depot on the base he was stationed at. Eventually, they were able to find a sitter for my little brother and I that was pretty close to the base. My parents wanted us to be as close as possible in case any emergencies ever came up, so they would actually drop us off at the sitter's house on their way to work every morning. Our babysitter was a young woman by the name of Terry. She had a nice house that stood out in her quaint little neighborhood. It was the only one on the block that was obviously very old, built in the antiquated colonial style that was popular many decades ago. Most of the other townsfolk lived in single or double-wide trailer homes. To add to its eccentricity, Terry's house was painted pink, like the color of bubble gum. As you know, I was no stranger to the paranormal, even at the tender age of 9. My sensitivity may have even grown since the last encounter I told you about. I would often see disembodied shadows of people and hear voices echoing down empty hallways. My mother gave me what she said was a blessed handkerchief to carry around everywhere I went. She instructed me to sing church songs out loud whenever I felt scared or threatened. When we first started getting dropped off at Terry's house, everything was normal. We would go to school, do our homework, eat snacks, play outside. You know, kid stuff. My mom would pick us up in the afternoons. After a while though, I started noticing strange things happening every now and then. Small things like glasses of juice tipping over for no reason, chairs sliding across the floor in empty rooms, disembodied footsteps clattering against the floors and thumping on the walls of empty hallways. My brother and I would sometimes even hear what sounded like a woman crying. The first major event happened around Christmas time. I was set to portray the Virgin Mary in a nativity play for our church. I was pretty excited because it was a singing role. One morning at Terry's house, I was sitting in the kitchen with her and my brother, getting ready to practice my songs. It's important to note that this kitchen had an old-school tiled ceiling. The moment I tried to start singing, the windows began to shake violently, shocking me into silence. After a moment or two, I decided to continue since the windows were known to shake a bit during windstorms. They were common at that time of year, so I chalked it up to an unexpected gust outside. When I opened my mouth to sing again, the ceiling tiles all fell down on us at once. At the same time, I heard a piercing scream. I'm not sure if it was Terry, my brother, or even my own voice. Terry scooped us up in both hands and held us close to her bosom. As the screaming faded away in my ears, I could hear my brother crying. We all huddled together under the kitchen table in a state of bewilderment for what seemed like minutes before Terry got up and led us out of the kitchen, carefully navigating the floor covered in broken ceramic tiles. As soon as we crossed the threshold into the next room, I heard a sound that to this day I cannot describe. I turned around and saw the tiles floating back up slowly, replacing themselves exactly as they were before they fell. It was like the event had never happened. For some reason, we collectively decided to pretend it really didn't happen. After that day, things kept on as usual with one exception. The woman's cries began to sound more and more clear. Whereas before it just sounded like muffled sobbing, I was able to gradually make out more of her words. It was like she was begging someone. "No, please, stop. Don't hurt me. I'm sorry." As time went on, we began to see apparitions of the woman appearing in the house. The strange thing is that her presence never felt the least bit frightening. Whenever a glass would fall or a window would shake, she would be there watching us. She radiated a warm, comforting energy. She was beautiful. She had shoulder-length blonde hair, very slim with green eyes, appearing to be in her 30s. After a while, though, she began appearing differently. Sometimes she would look like she'd been beaten up, her eyes swollen shut, lips split open, the side of her head sunken in and lolling over to one side. When she appeared to us, we would sometimes also see a man. Unlike the pleasant woman, he was an imposing figure, probably late 30s or early 40s. He had pale white skin with light brown hair and dark eyes filled with rage. His face seemed permanently trapped in a scowl, and the purest kind of malice emanated from him whenever he was around. I had the distinct feeling that he would have no qualms, hurting or even killing me or my brother if he had the chance. One day while I was at school, a storm hit that had the whole region scrambling to evacuate. My parents decided to have me stay with Terry until my dad could get away from his duties, preparing the military base to weather the storm. My little brother was already with my mom and on his way home, so I ended up going to Terry's house alone for the first time. That made me a bit anxious. I had a bad feeling about the whole scenario. The storm raged on until nighttime as I waited for my dad to come pick me up. At some point, I decided to snuggle into the couch to relax. This is the part where things get a bit fuzzy. I'm not sure whether the following took place in my dreams or not. All I know is that I don't remember falling asleep, but rather entering a sort of trance. In the house around me, I began to see visions of a man and woman walking around looking really happy. I could see that it was the same couple that had been appearing to us in the house. I'd never seen them looking so pleasant and so full of life. The pair was bright and loving, moving boxes and furniture and setting them throughout the house, as if they were just moving in. They seemed to enjoy a banter between themselves which I could not hear. Before long, though, things took a turn toward a dark path that my childlike mind was not exactly prepared for. I began to see the man drinking from glass bottles and hitting the woman. Time seemed to speed up as the hitting and drinking continued in a heartbreaking cycle. The woman stayed through it all, even though she was clearly suffering, and her injuries multiplied. I began to notice something odd as time went by. When the man moved, a liquid-like substance flung from his arms and hands, splattering and soaking into the walls like blood. His footsteps left imprints of the substance on the floor. It was as if the anger and hatred in his actions were taking a physical form and infusing into the very structure of the home whenever he raised his hand to strike her. At one point, he began beating her more fiercely than ever. She begged him to stop. He wouldn't, or couldn't stop. After a while, her waif-like form crumpled to the ground in front of me. Apparently realizing what he had done, the man wept over her for only a moment. Before long, somehow his sadness was channeled or transformed into even more anger. He began kicking and stomping her frail, broken body for what seemed like several more days. He continued to drink and wander around the house, the concentrated wrath oozing and dripping from his body, seeping into the floorboards and every surface he came into contact with. Eventually, he picked up her body and carried it into the master bedroom. There he laid her on the bed before lying down next to her. A gun appeared in his hand, and he shot himself. The gunshot was the first sound I heard since the vision began. It snapped me out of it instantly. As my eyes opened, I saw my dad. He was carrying me in his arms out to his car. My mind was preoccupied with this feeling that the man wanted to trap the woman, that he would do anything to make sure he wouldn't lose her. And to tell you the truth, I didn't completely comprehend what I had seen at the time. It's just my clear memory of the vision that enables me to process it now with my adult mind. Weeks went by before I told my mom what I had seen that day. But after what happened with the lady in the yellow dress, she had no problem believing me. She got us a new sitter not long after that. I never did go back to that pink house, nor have I seen Terry since that time. She always used to say that nothing strange ever happened in the house except when my brother and I were there. Anyway, thanks for listening, Mr. X. Sincerely, Tammy. Alright, so, lots to talk about in this story. So many questions come to mind with this one, which is why I consider it to be one of the most fascinating stories I've gotten in my inbox to date. So, let's break down a few of my observations, then we'll talk about what the dreamers had to say about this story. If you know me, it won't surprise you to hear that I have some theories about the idea of ghostly apparitions and things like that. I often wonder, especially when reading stories like this one, if or how people are able to affect this world, or at least the way other human beings perceive this world, after death. Is there something, some grain of truth in all these stories of ghosts and phantoms walking about the earth? Another concept introduced in this story is the idea of raw human emotions like anger or rage being distilled into liquid form. The negative energy from this unknown man seemed to have leached its way into the very walls and other parts of the home itself. Interesting to think about. If this was indeed a real thing, it would be very important to keep ourselves as emotionally centered as possible so as not to contaminate our surroundings. In fact, that's probably good advice either way. Now, those twilight moments that can drag on for minutes, I've experienced moments like that. Visions of things happening all around me as I get close to the precipice of sleep. I would probably say that overall I'm glad I don't have to be subjected to the sights that poor young Tammy had to see, but I've had my share of strange visions in that time and headspace. Normally, seeing such a story play out in a dream might somewhat discredit the experience in many people's minds, but consider this for a moment. If there is truly any lasting effect, any energies that humans leave behind when we die, and these energies could be perceived by certain people in the form of a dream, or a dream-like, trance-like vision, then really, what's the difference between that and reality? Does it matter that the information conveyed is perceived in a dream state? Let me know what you think about that. I actually am really curious. Then there's the fact that Terry said the things in her home were totally normal until Tammy and her brother showed up. Makes me wonder, was it their very presence that activated this latent paranormal energy? Like, say for example, you live in a house and there's a stack of VHS tapes, but you don't have a VHS tape player, so you would never know what was on them. One day somebody comes to visit and they happen to have a VHS tape player, and you put that in and you get to see what's recorded there, if you know what I mean. Imagine that whatever tragedies happened in that house left some type of scar. There could be locations all over the world where things like this, these recordings and these paranormal energy signatures are just lying hidden and dormant, waiting for the right human catalyst to unlock that information. So if I could extract a moral out of this story, it would be this. Never allow yourself to be taken advantage of or deliberately hurt by anyone. If there's a way to get help or get away, please do your best to do that. Nobody deserves to be treated the way this young lady was treated, according to the vision. Also, when I was reading the story live, a lot of the dreamers were requesting that I do an updated rendition of Tammy's previous story she shared several years ago about the haunting of the woman in the yellow dress. As I recall, it was a very interesting account, and it even included what may have been some sort of canine, cryptid, dogman-like situation in there as well. If you're interested in that too, leave me a comment down below, and you'll hear all about it in a future video. Before I get out of here, remember to turn on your notifications. That way, you'll know when I go online and discuss these stories live with the dreamers. You might even see a comment or question that you submit end up in a future video. And you'll have a chance to sponsor the show with a super chat. Stay tuned for the names of my sponsors after this. And by the way, if you're listening to this part of the video, if you're still here, type the code word GOOPY into a comment down below so I can see you. Take care, my friends. Until next time. The Mr. X Dreams Show is now sponsored by dreamers like you. This week's episode is sponsored by Ambar Chavez, Dark Waters, Dezombified, Ice Cube, Leann, Lorie Long, MulleM, Sgt Moe, Shinfitz, Teresa Lease, Terico Tomoso, Timdawg 09, Xochitl Gonzalez, Zen 2011, and Zucker Schnecke. Thank you all very much. All right. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, don't forget to like and share. If you made it to the very end, you're exactly the kind of subscriber I'm looking for. Don't forget to turn on those notifications. That way, you can catch the live show and discuss the stories with me. Your input might even appear in my next video. Last thing, if you heard a code word after the story, type it in a comment down below so I know who the real dreamers are. Take care, my friend. Until next time.